Welcome to the next Q&A review for our managerial economics course. This one covers Chapter 6, and we're going to take a look at the Q&A 6.1, the first Q&A from Chapter 6. This woman, Meredith, her firm has sent her to a conference for managers and paid her registration fee. Included in the registration fee is free admission to a class on how to price derivative securities, such as options. She's considering attending, but her most attractive alternative is to attend a talk at the same time by Warren Buffett on his investment strategies. She would be willing to pay $100 to hear his talk, and the cost of the ticket is $40. Given that attending either talk involves no other costs, what is Meredith's opportunity cost of attending the derivatives talk? And then what you need to know is what is Meredith foregoing by not going to the Warren Buffett talk? We know that she values the talk at $100 and would have willingly paid $40 for it. So that talk would have generated 60 units of consumer surplus. So the opportunity cost is the $60 of consumer surplus she is not generating by not going to the Warren Buffett speech. So she willingly would have paid $100. She actually has to pay $40. So she generates $60 worth of consumer surplus. When she doesn't go there, that 60 units of $60 worth of consumer surplus she doesn't generate. That is the opportunity cost of her attending the derivatives talk and not attending the Warren Buffett talk. Now we move to Q&A 6.2. And in this one, we're talking about a firm, and it can manufacture at home. A firm faces input prices for labor and capital of W and R and produces Q units of output using L units of labor and K units of capital. Abroad, wage and capital costs are half as much as at home. If the firm manufactures abroad, will it change the mix of capital and labor used? What happens to the cost of producing Q? So we want to know, number one, if this firm decides not to produce this item in their home country, sets up shop in another country, if the fact that wage and labor costs are half in the other country, will that impact the mix of capital and labor that it uses in the production process, and what will happen to their costs of production because of the shift to overseas? So the main thing that you need to look at is this going to impact the ISO cost lines? All right, from your textbook, you saw that in order to minimize costs, you go to the point where you're on an ISO quant line that is just tangent to your ISO cost line. And if we were to change the slope of those ISO cost lines, i.e. that capital or labor would be less expensive or more expensive, changing the slope of the ISO cost line would cause the mix of capital and labor to change. So we want to take a look at what's the slope of the ISO cost line home and abroad. At home, it's just going to be negative the wage rate over the cost of capital, negative W over R. Since these are half, we are going to have negative W divided by 2 over R divided by 2. Simplifying that, you see that the slope of the ISO cost line remains unchanged, that the slope of these two lines are identical to one another, and since the slope of the ISO costs are identical to one another and the technologies are the same, this company is going to use the same exact mix of capital, the same ratio of capital to labor at home as they are abroad, because the slope of the ISO cost line remains unchanged. All right, so we want to take a look at what happens to costs. So the cost at home is just W times L, so the wage rate times the amount of workers, plus R times the amount of capital, and that will give us our costs. And we will insert the costs abroad, which are going to be half for both labor and capital. And when we do that, we have W divided by 2. multiplied by L plus R divided by 2 multiplied by K, and that gives us C divided by 2. So by moving abroad, this firm, what it accomplishes is it cuts its production costs in half, but it still uses the same mix of capital in doing that. And our last Q&A, 6.3. What is the shape of the long-run cost function for a fixed proportion production function in which it takes 1 unit of labor and 1 unit of capital to produce 1 unit of output? What is the shape of the average cost curve? Does it have economies or diseconomies of scale? And in reading this, the important part of this is that we know we have a fixed proportion production function, meaning that capital and labor are perfect complements to one another. Translated, what that means is every time I use an additional unit of labor, I have to use an additional unit of capital. And especially taking a look here, it tells us it takes 1 unit of labor and 1 unit of capital to produce 1 unit of output. So if I have 1 labor and 1 piece of capital, I produce 1 unit of output. If I have 2 laborers and 2 units of capital, I produce 2 units of output. So that's the important component of this, to realize that it's a fixed proportion production function. And the remainder of this sentence tells us the relationship that occurs in the cost function. So that's our cost function right there, but we know that in order for us to produce 1 unit of output, I have to have 1 unit of labor and 1 unit of capital. If I produce 2 units of output, I have to have 2 units of labor and 2 units of capital, which means that Q is equal to L and K is equal to L. So I can substitute Q in there. So I get the cost function is W times Q plus R times Q. And if I simplify that out or factor out W plus R, I have W plus R multiplied by Q gives me the cost function. So looking at this tells us what the long run total cost curve looks like. It's a straight line and it has a slope of W plus R. So this part in here, W plus R, is going to be the slope of our long run cost function. Now if I want average total cost, I just take my cost function and divide by Q. So I know that average cost is equal to cost divided by Q. So if I just place this in the numerator, so we have W plus R multiplied by Q, which is right here in the brackets, and then we divide by Q, that will give us our average cost. This Q and that Q cancel one another out, so my average cost function for this firm is equal to W plus R, so the long run average total cost function is a horizontal line and it is equal to the wage rate plus the cost of capital. So we have a horizontal line for our average cost function, our long run average cost function. And because it's a horizontal line, it does not exhibit economies of scale or diseconomies of scale. It exhibits constant opportunity. Excuse me, I almost said constant opportunity cost. Constant economies of scale. So no, we don't see a U-shaped average total cost function in the long run. We just see a horizontal line, and that indicates that there is an absence of economies of scale.